This is Tell Me What to Read, powered by Booktopia. I'm Nick Wasiliev, and today we sit down for a special takeover aimed at levelling up your life. In today's episode, special guest host Bec Brown sits down for a special conversation with the one and only Amantha Imber, author of the incredible new book on mastering time management and utilising powerful habits, Time-Wise. Check the show notes for timestamps for the interview, and if you enjoy our content, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts, a link on Spotify, or wherever you are listening to our show. Now over to Bec Brown's interview with Amantha Imber, author of Time-Wise, which you can purchase in the description right now from booktopia.com.au.
Hi, I'm Bec Brown, and I'm the founder of public relations and crisis management company, The Comms Department. I'm also the author of You've Got This, which is a career guide for creatives. I'm lucky enough to be speaking with Dr. Amantha Imber today, and if you're someone who's ever said, I just wish I had more hours in the day, this conversation is for you. It's geared towards giving you some really effective and practical tips on how you can become more focused, be ultra productive so that you have more time to do the things that are most important to you, and to give you some shortcuts that will make your work life a lot less stressful. But before we jump in, I just want to give you some background to set the scene for you. In my book, You've Got This, I lay out some tips and research-backed practical advice that will help you create a career that you love while earning great money doing it, but without it sucking the life out of you. It covers a lot of ground, and a small part of the book touches on time management that will help you create that happy work life that we're all after. But Amantha Imber's brand new book, Time-Wise, is the ultimate deep dive into this topic around time management that will be a game changer for you. This is Amantha's third book, and I can personally say, after reading her previous books, that they just keep getting better. Now, if you don't know who Amantha is, she's an organisational psychologist and the founder of behavioural science consultancy Inventium. She's also the co-creator of the Australian Financial Review's Most Innovative Companies list and the AFR Boss Magazine's Best Place to Work list. And she's helped companies like Google, Apple, Disney, Lego, Atlassian, Commonwealth Bank, and many more reinvent the way that they approach their work. Last year, Amantha won the Thinkers 50 Innovation Award. This is a global award which recognises the thinker who's contributed the most to the understanding of innovation worldwide over the last 2 years. And being awarded it is a really big deal. It's like the Oscars or the Grammys for management thinking. And Amantha is the first Australian to win the award. So safe to say, we are in expert hands here today. Amantha is also the host of the #1 ranking business podcast, How I Work, where she interviews some of the world's most successful people about their habits, rituals, and strategies for optimizing their day. With over 3 million podcast downloads, she's interviewed more than 150 best-selling authors, musicians, entertainers, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, all to get inside their heads and understand their routines and rituals that enable them to achieve their purpose. And it's thanks to these conversations with these amazing guests, combined with the latest scientific research, that Amantha's excellent book, Time-Wise, is now in the world. With achievements and credentials like these, it becomes pretty obvious that Amantha is also someone who fits a lot into her day and is clearly someone who applies these tips in her own life. Amantha, thank you so much for prioritising this conversation to be a part of your day today.
Thank you so much, Bec.
Now, there are so many great things to take away from this book, but one of the things that I love about it straight up is the way that you've structured it into 7 main categories with a summary at the end of each category, which kind of breaks down the complexity of this time management topic so that it's really easy to understand and action. So for everyone listening, can you explain what those 7 categories are and why each of them are so important?
For sure. And look, as an author yourself, Bec, I'm sure you can understand how difficult it is to structure a book. Oh my goodness, this caused me so much grief during the writing process. I went through so many different structures, but I landed on one that chunks all the tips and hacks in the book into 7 categories that I think are 7 really important things that we all need to think about with how we use our time. So the book starts with looking at priorities and how do we actually get clear on deciding what matters in our life? What should we be aiming for and striving for? And what should we perhaps leave on the cutting room floor? We then move into structure and looking at what is the best way to actually structure our days and design them proactively rather than just reacting to what life gives us. We then move into efficiency and looking at some tips for working faster and smarter. This is probably the part of the book that most closely resembles productivity porn. And I should add, the book is not a productivity porn book, but there are some things that needed to work faster and smarter. We then move into focus and how to get into flow, which I think is such a big challenge for people in this world where we're just digitally distracted literally every few minutes. So it is how to sort of fight against the battle against digital distractions. We then move into reflection, and this is kind of where we look inside ourselves and ask ourselves questions around how do we think about what matters and what's important. And we look at imposter syndrome and think about self-doubt and how we can use self-doubt as a strength rather than a weakness, as many people think it is. And then the last two sections of the book, one is about connection and some strategies for helping to build better relationships with the people that we work with and play with and live with. And finally, energy, and looking at how can we maintain our spark throughout our day and stay energized.
I love that. They're so good. And do you know, which you actually mentioned in the introduction to the book, you talk about how to read the book, you can either read it from beginning to end, or you can dip in and out of the chapters that really speak to you. And it's quite funny because the day I picked up your book, I was not feeling peak energy. and I really wanted a few hacks basically to really give me some strategies to jump into that. And I actually started at the back, and then I worked my way and I went back to the front and worked through. And I think that's a really great, it's one of those great books that you can dip in and out of and take what you need as you need it. So that we can give a real taste of the gems inside of TimeWise, and so that we can make sure that everyone who's listening can take away some strategies that they can start applying right away. Can we choose and share some of your favourite strategies? And I also thought it would be great to find out from you which of these strategies really surprised you when you found out about them.
Oh gosh, it's like asking me to choose my favorite child, which is easy because I only have one. But in the book, there's so many strategies, and with the strategies, there's probably about 100 or so in the book. I've literally tried every single one of them. So maybe let's start with a couple of the quite surprising ones, and they're from the section around focus and how we can get better at maintaining focus with the work that we're doing. So one of the most surprising things I heard came from Kevin Rose. And Kevin Rose is quite a high-profile venture capitalist and investor over in Silicon Valley. So he was an early-stage investor in companies like Twitter and Facebook and some quite well-known tech companies. And Kevin, at the time when I connected with him, he had been thinking about how many times he was picking up his mobile phone every day. And for many of us, this is actually several hundred times a day. It's very, very high. For Kevin, he was slightly lower than the average person. He said he was picking up his phone when he had looked at the statistics about 100 times a day. And often just in a really mindless way, just out of habit. And he really wanted to reduce the amount of times he was doing that. So what he did, he put a rubber band around his phone, horizontally. And what that would mean is whenever he picked up his phone, he would have to remove the rubber band to unlock his phone and then check it for whatever reason he needed to. Now, what that did is it acted as a barrier in the way to mindless phone picking up and checking. And so he would actually have to think, do I really need to check my phone? Because it's a bit of a hassle removing the rubber band and then putting it back on. And through that very simple but quite quirky strategy, he reduced the number of times he was picking up his phone to just 30 times a day, which is very, very low. So I love that strategy.
Reduction. Yeah, it's so simple. And you're right. It's just creating a simple deterrent that will stop you from doing this one thing that you don't want to do. Is there another one on the flip side of that? Is there one where you talk about making it easier for you to do things that you do want to do. So if you want to stop doing things, put some deterrents in place. If you do want to do more of things, what can you do to make that easier?
Well, there's actually a few tips in the book along that theme. One that I particularly love is it applies a thing called nudge theory, which is really about changing our physical environment just to nudge ourselves into doing more of the things that we know we should be doing and less of the things that perhaps we shouldn't be doing. And so the example in the book comes from Matt Mullenweg. And like, listeners probably haven't heard of Matt because he's not high profile, but what he has done is quite amazing. So he is the co-founder of WordPress and Automatic. And WordPress, in case like you're not a web or IT geek, powers about a third of the websites on the internet. So most websites are built using WordPress and Matt's technology. And something Matt told me is that he thinks about how he can design his physical environment to do more of the behaviors that he wants to be doing. So for example, he says on his bedside table, if he leaves the Kindle on top of his phone, he's much more likely to pick up the Kindle and read. But he knows that if he puts his phone on top of the Kindle, he's much more likely to do like look through his phone and waste away time scrolling through things that are not particularly adding value to his life. And so he sort of thinks about simple changes like that. And I think we can all do that. Like basically think about how you can design your physical environment in a way that the things that you want to be doing are easier to you, closer to do, and so forth. And the things that you don't want to do are further away.
That's such a great idea. And I did not realize that WordPress powered that much of the internet. Just jumping back to that too. Are there other, again, like you've gleaned advice from so many incredibly successful people and then really supercharge that with your own scientific research, which is very reassuring to any cynics out there who might not, who do struggle with taking advice sometimes. Jumping over to work-life balance, because I think that's something that's at the forefront of so many people, particularly after the last couple of insane years we've all been living through. I think there's a lot of, having read the book, there are in every category a lot of strategies that you can apply that will make your work life better. Are there a few in particular that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, like I think it's a really important thing, thinking about how we balance our work and life. And again, like this is not a book that is about to tell you like how to work harder and like achieve more at work, although there's strategies that will help you do that. Look, I think one fundamental thing to think about, which it was John Zeratsky who first kind of gave me this idea about thinking about how we use our time. And John used to be a partner at Google Ventures, which is the arm of Google that does their investing. And John said to me, most people, when it comes to their calendar, they play defense. Like they're just reacting to what goes into it. Like, a lot of people will sort of be at the mercy of meetings that get booked into their calendar by teammates or, clients or whoever. And they will often start their day playing defense because they'll open up their inbox and they'll see what incoming messages there are and what people are requesting that they do. But John says it's really important that we actually think about our time and we play offense. So we start to be proactive with how we think about our time. And what John does, he has designed what is his ideal week, and not just about work and when he does certain types of work, but his whole life. Like, when does he do exercise or look after his health? When does he spend time with his partner? When does he spend time connecting with friends? And he literally maps out Monday to Sunday and what an ideal week looks like. And he overlays that with his real calendar so that he can design a week that is as closely aligned to his ideal week as possible. So he plays offense rather than defense. And I really love that as an idea. And it's something that I try to do personally. And in my own diary, like, for example, health is one of my core values. I think without our health, I mean, we're useless. I'm useless as a mother. I'm useless as a friend. I'm useless as a partner. I'm useless as a teammate at work if I don't have my health. And so in my diary, for example, I do training at the gym, generally weights training 4 times a week. And I know that I need an hour blocked out for each of those sessions. And so I put that in my diary, and my assistant knows that cannot be booked over. It gets done. And normally it's during the workday. It's generally late morning when I do my workouts now. And that's a nice sort of break in the day. But it's me being proactive and playing offense with my time, as opposed to letting my diary just get filled with things and me going, oh, when am I going to fit my gym workouts in? Oh, I don't have time. Well, I do, because I prioritize it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have taken a very similar approach, and I found it's a game changer. And when you can map out that time and everyone knows it, it also comes back to learning to communicate with everyone around you so they understand what your non-negotiables are. 2 points I want to talk to you about that. One, which there's another strategy in here which is fantastic, which is around not scheduling back-to-back meetings, which is again another game changer. Could you just explain a little bit around how that works?
So this comes from the idea that, like, so many of us are in back-to-back meetings, and we're scheduled, like we're booked at 100%. And the problem that happens is, if you are booked at 100%, like your diary is literally a back-to-back meetings day, is that it leaves no room for when, like, spontaneous things pop up, or when emergencies pop up, or when unexpected things pop up. And so I think it was Darren Murph that first gave me this tip, although I have heard it from a few different leaders and CEOs, where he deliberately doesn't book his day at 100%. So if you look at his diary, about 50% of it might be full, maybe 70%, but he deliberately leaves room for the unexpected. And he does that so that there's room for innovation and, for spontaneous chats with people, or, if he gets a call from the school and he has to pick up his kids early, because if you are booked at 100% and things go wrong, then you're not only impacting your own day, you're impacting everyone else who is booked in your diary on that day.
Yeah, exactly. It's a kindness to yourself and a kindness to others.
Yes.
The other thing, jumping back to what you were talking about around planning out your ideal week, I think that one jumps back to your category 1 or chapter 1, which is around priorities. Do you want to explain a little bit around, how we can set priorities and kind of why that's so important?
Well, I know for me, many years ago, back when I just became really obsessed with how I was using my own time and getting very self-reflective in some of the challenges that I was experiencing in my workday. I remember it had got to the end of a year, and at Inventium, we use OKRs for goal setting, objectives, and key results. And even though I'm the founder of the business, and I think at the time I was CEO, I've since demoted myself just to being a regular team member. I remember it got to the end of the year, and I'm like, I don't even remember what my goals are. Like, I feel like I've spent the entire year just reacting to everybody else's needs and everybody else's priorities and everybody else's goals, and I've completely lost track of my own. And as the founder and CEO at the time, that is not a good position to be in. And having done delivered a lot of presentations to like tens of thousands of people, I know that is a very, very common problem where we just lose track of what we're actually meant to be focused on. So that is why the section on prioritization is so important. But interestingly, one of my favorite strategies from that section comes from Professor Adam Alter, who's at the Stern School of Business at NYU over in New York. And he actually talks about goal setting and how he's not a fan of goal setting, which is kind of counterintuitive because we're all taught to set SMART goals, that lovely little acronym, and, set goals, and that will help us focus and stuff. But a goal in and of itself is actually quite unhelpful, Adam says. So like when you have a goal, like let's just say, my goal last year, I've lost track of time. When did I write time-wise? I don't know, but quite recently. But my goal, at the time could have been to write, I think it's about 70,000 words. But the problem with a goal like that is that until you reach that goal, like until I hit that 70,000 word mark, I'm failing. Like if I'm at 20,000 words, I've failed because I'm not at 70,000. If I'm at 60,000, I've still failed because I'm not at 70,000. So a goal in and of itself is quite demotivating because you've failed until you hit that end point. So instead, Adam says, instead of goals, he thinks about systems. So what are daily, weekly, regular systems that he can have that he knows if he sticks to that system, it will get him to that end point eventually? So in the case of writing a book, my system became, well, I'm going to write about 1,000 words a day. And I know that if I do that, then I will hit that goal in 70 working days if I stick to that system. And then every day when I write 1,000 words, I can feel really good because I've stuck to the system, whereas I'm not like in the state of failure because I haven't hit the goal yet.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant advice. It's so simple when you think about it. Ultimately, you're breaking down a huge goal into tiny steps, manageable steps, but you're celebrating them along the way and making yourself feel good, which then spurs momentum. And it's such a good tip. I like too that it helps you. It can help you decide whether or not that goal is a good idea, because suddenly, like, it's very exciting to say, I want to create a business, or I want to build a home. But until you break down all of those little steps along the way, you have to really go, hang on, am I going to enjoy doing those steps? Is doing those steps something I actually want to do and spend my time doing? So that's a double whammy. I love it. The other category that really spoke to me was around connection. And the very first one, which was just a dream, and now I'm like, why doesn't everybody have one of these, is the one-page operating manual. Can you explain what that is? Because I think it's wild, and now I just want to send mine out to everybody before I do anything.
Awesome. I love this one too. And we use it at Inventium. So what this is all about, like, if you think about the last time you got a new gadget or some piece of hardware, like, I don't know, maybe a new washing machine or some new software to do something with, like, chances are it came with an operating manual, because these things can be tricky to use. But if you think about humans, like, humans are far more complex than any machine or software that we can get. But we don't come with an operating manual. And if you think about, the last time you started working with someone new, or maybe, like, listeners have recently joined a new organization, and so they're working with lots of new people, it takes time to really get to know how to work with someone, how to get the best out of them, and for them to learn the same about you. And so this idea also comes from Darren Murph, the head of remote at GitLab, which is a big tech company. And he says, and something that he does is he has created essentially what is, it's a one-page operating manual on how to work with Darren. So what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? What are the things that he's trying to improve? Where has he received feedback that might be helpful for you to know about? He's got a whole lot of stuff on his one-page operating manual, but at Inventium, we've simplified it, and there are a few key questions that we ask people to fill in theirs. And it's something that every new starter at Inventium completes. And as the existing team, we've all completed our one-page operating manual, or OPOM as we call them. And when someone starts, it's like they've got these shortcuts to know how to work with us all. Like, an example question that we have is, how do you prefer to be communicated with? Which is such a basic question, but most people wouldn't know the answer, because generally we all just communicate with people in the way that we like, but maybe that doesn't suit the other people that we work with. So a lot of people at Inventium prefer asynchronous communication, so non-live communication, like emails or text messages, as opposed to getting a phone call, because we all work sort of slightly different hours. So it's a really important thing to know about people that can have a big impact on how much we enjoy, like, communicating with each other.
Yeah, it really does. And ultimately, how we do communicate with one another will determine how happy and successful and easy our lives are as well. And it also ultimately is a time saver, because you're not constantly having to remind people of something. You've kind of said it once, might have to remind them down the track, but you're not always in that challenging position where you're repeating yourself all the time or feeling frustrated about it as well. I have two more that I wanted to check in with you on. One is interesting because it's around money, and the other is around fun. So let's start with the money one, which is around focusing on what I call 10K tasks, as 10K tasks as opposed to your $10 tasks. This was a really great one because I think a lot of the time when we think about how we spend our time, it might be focusing on what's important versus what's urgent. But when you actually put a dollar value on it, as somebody like I know a lot of lawyers or anybody who works in a service industry who kind of bill by the hour, generally it's quite mindful of their time in that respect. But this is a really great way to think for everybody, and it can apply to whether it's your work life or your home life.
This is this one was a really interesting one. This comes from Perry Marshall, who is I'd say one of the most in-demand consultants for entrepreneurs and business owners. And Perry has this concept where he gets people to think about what is a $10 an hour task, what is $100 an hour task, what is $1,000 an hour task, and what is a $10,000 an hour task. And he gives the example of, say, a receptionist at a dental surgery. And a lot of the stuff that the receptionist does are $10 an hour tasks. They might be sort of organizing papers and filing things and stuff like that. But let's just say they get a phone call and it's someone that wants to book $4,000 worth of dental surgery, and they put them on hold to do something else, maybe to answer another call that might just be, when is my appointment booked for, or something that, would be a $10 an hour task. And the person that wants to book in the $4,000 worth of surgery, they get a little bit sick of waiting on hold and they hang up, and maybe they go somewhere else. And if you think about that few minutes where that person was on hold and that receptionist could have brought in $4,000 worth of revenue to the dental surgery, but they opted to do a $10 an hour task instead, that was a really poor use of their time. And so he encourages people to think about, with how you're using your time, how can you do more of the $1,000 or $10,000 an hour tasks and less of the less valuable tasks? Can you stop doing the things that are the $10 an hour tasks? Can you delegate them, for example, maybe to a virtual assistant? Are they really that important? So it's a reflection on how you're using your time and what are the most valuable things that you're doing, what are the least valuable, and trying to remove the least valuable.
Yeah, excellent. All right, I want to end on a lighter note, of the lightest note, and it's around sending funnier emails. The reason I want to end on this is because, there is nothing more joyful than when somebody sends you a funny meme or a great a witty one-liner, or particularly when you're not expecting it. If you're in the throes of a crazy work day and suddenly somebody's actually taken the time to say something funny, it does hit, and it's a lovely thing, a way of lightening the mood and making things feel a bit more joyful. But for some people who say, well, I don't have time to be joyful, I'm working and I'm very productive. Can you tell us about some of the science behind this? Because you've really checked this to make sure it actually stacks up.
Yeah, look, this comes from someone that I loved interviewing on How I Work, Naomi Bagdonis, and she co-wrote a book called Humor Seriously with Jennifer Eicher. And they both teach a course to Stanford MBA students about how to be funny. Like, that's mental. I need to do that because I just think that's awesome. And she gets her class to do an email audit where they're asked to look through, I think it's the last 10 emails that they sent, and look at like what is the language that they're using and like how serious, how business speaky is it, and they have some fun around that. And I think it's a really good exercise to go through, because for whatever reason we all seem to feel at work that we need to be so serious and speak the language of business when we send like electronic communication, like email or messages and so forth. But they're just so boring to read. But if we can use humor, there's so much science and research behind this. Like, it will make what we're sending stand out. It will motivate people to want to actually engage in communication with us and write back. And interestingly, we've experimented with all sorts of things at Inventium around this. So we, one of the things that we do, as you mentioned in my intro, is that we partner with the Australian Financial Review in their most innovative companies list and also in the best places to work list. And part of the work that we do involves getting tens of thousands of people to complete surveys. And so we're always looking for how can we increase response rates for what we do. And we found just through putting in some funny memes throughout what is about a 7-minute survey, significantly increased response rates. I mean, it is amazing what you can do through adding some humor to your job.
That's the best. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Amantha. I wish I was quick enough and witty enough to come up with some really great, funny one-liner to end it, but unfortunately that's not my wheelhouse. But I am going to find a great meme at some point today and make sure that I share it.
Excellent.
And thank you to everyone for listening to Tell Me What to Read. Timewise is out now, and it really is one of the best investments that you can make to give you more time back in your life to do the things that you love. And based on this, you'll enjoy it and have a bit of a laugh and a good time doing it too. So thanks again.
Thanks to Amantha Imber and Bec Brown. You can find links to Timewise in the description below or head over to booktopia.com.au. If you enjoyed our show today, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts or a like on Spotify and let us know what you think. Or if you're enjoying our show, you can subscribe to our channel and be notified whenever new episodes drop. Links in the description. Before we go, we have a sponsored book for today's episode, and that is fantasy horror novel The Witchfinder's Mark by Paul M. Clarke. In Beckbourne, Lancashire, 2 girls are accused of witchcraft. Samuel Hawke travels to the isolated village for an investigation, which may prove to be his last. He finds a community torn apart by fear and paranoia. His hopes of a simple examination are dashed when the mystery of the 2 girls unravels in a deadly way. You can grab a copy of The Witchfinder's Mark right now in the description as our sponsored book for this episode. Join us next Tuesday as we sit down for another book chat with award-winning filmmaker, YouTuber, and self-described oddball Beau Miles, discussing his new upcoming film, Bad Rivers, and his book, The Backyard Adventurer. Thanks for listening, and never stop reading.